Hello and welcome to our webinar today. The title of today's webinar is It's Time to Automate Your Data Center. Learn how orcharhino can help you right after installation. My name is Jan Bundesmann. I'm a senior IT consultant at ATIX. ATIX is an open source consulting company which is specialized around data center automation. With me, there is Jonas Trüschet, my colleague, also a senior IT consultant at ATIX. He will mainly watch the questions you post in the appropriate channel and forward them to me as soon there is a slot for answering questions. I will begin with a short introduction about ATIX and what orcharhino in general is, and afterwards I will give you a quick demonstration what orcharhino can do right after installation. So in between those two parts, there's a perfect time for answering your general questions. And at the end, if you have more questions, I will answer them gladly and give you more insights. So let's start with a quick introduction about ATIX. When we're talking about data center automation, there's a lot of tooling involved. And that's probably the main reason why companies ask consultancies. We know, or we have a lot of knowledge about many of those tools, particularly if they are originating in the open source area, which means we focus on Linux related stuff, but we're also able to deal with your Windows servers. The central tool in this field of data center automation is configuration management. That's why you see on the slide the logos of Puppet, Ansible, SaltStack. But of course, nowadays there's a lot going on in the field of containers. So you see Docker, Kubernetes, Rancher, OpenShift. Anyways, in the center, there's always the host, basic infrastructure, and this is where orcharhino will help with all the topics around automation. But first, why do we automate it all? I think it's a well-known saying nowadays that companies that have faster deployment rate or higher deployment rate are seen as more as having more success. So that's why a lot of companies want to speed up their deployments. This is only possible if you automate as much as possible. Then, of course, everything that's automated gains a level of stability that you cannot reach by hand. Your infrastructure is reproducible, so you know what you did. If you do steps by hand, then of course there's a certain chance that the second time you do something slightly different than the first time. You totally avoid this risk if you automate all your data center configuration. Then, if you have complex services and you have to orchestrate them, automation helps you a lot. And eventually, automation can help you to enable self-service. So your application developers, your operations teams do not really have to dig deep into this Linux system management, but they really can just go to some self-service portal and click on the infrastructure they desire. So that's the ultimate goal. We are now still talking about the infrastructure parts, so a very low-level automation, I would say. How does orcharhino and the ATIX fit in there? If we're talking about our infrastructure, then we're talking about hosts, be it bare metal or virtualized servers in the cloud. We're talking about the base operating system and how this is configured. And these are all the nice logos gathered here on this slide. And these are all things that we can touch with the orcharhino. And we have a lot of expertise in all these different subtopics. Now, what does orcharhino do? So probably that's the most important question at the moment. Orcharhino cares for your servers. If they are bare metal servers or virtual machines, they always have to be deployed at some point, and then they want to have more software, they want to have packages, and they want to be configured. This whole life cycle can be managed through orcharhino. You will see later in the demonstration how this actually looks like, but let's stay with this abstract view for the moment. So these are the three key features orcharhino cares for. And I want to quickly introduce those three features, how orcharhino cares for them, so you have an impression. For deployment, let's say you want to install a Linux server. There's nowadays documented and well-established ways how to do this. So basically you start a server, run the install image, and provide some human-readable file, configuration file, for an unattended installation mechanism to run. So these mechanisms, or the files are called Kickstart, Preseed, Autorest for the respective distribution. So Kickstart relates to Red Hat-like operating systems, Preseed to Debian-likes, and Autorest to SUSE. There's something similar also for Windows. But orcharhino goes one step further and even cares for providing your virtual machine or your cloud instance. So orcharhino can talk to your hypervisor, can start the virtual machine, can create the DHCP entries and the name server entries, let the virtual machine boot, give it all the information it requires to arrive at that point to start the kickstart process, for instance, and then eventually after some minutes you will have a new host. It does similar things also for, as I said, cloud instances. There it can, for instance, clone a given template, or it can also care for bare metal servers. There are similar methods as for the virtual machines, and for bare metal servers you can also create a specific USB stick. You just plug it into your bare metal server, boot it, and it will register with the orcharhino and then perform this unattended automatic installations. You do not have to care for the individual installation process. After such a host is installed, we need to have packages. This is the second big topic. Orcharhino can act as a repository server, but again, we go one step further. So it can act as a repository server for, let's say, all the Linux distributions. So it can provide RPM and deb packages. But not only just the latest version, but it can provide staged repositories. This is what is labeled here as a content view, which is a technical term in that sense. So, for instance, we say we synchronize our repositories today, and then we say we want to have this version of June 30th, which is available to host A. And even if the orcharhino itself receives more recent versions of the packages, the host will only see the packages from June 30th. This is done to obtain operational stability. So your productive services won't be disturbed by any updates. Of course, on the other hand, you have the security department, which says, okay, operational stability is one point, but sometimes we really need to provide something like a patch. Might it be some SSL problem, some sudo problem, some kernel-related thing. There is a well-established way that originates from Red Hat Linux, which is called errata. This is a set of meta information which contains the description of the security vulnerability and the affected packages, and also a remedy. So which package upgrades would solve the security issue. Orcharhino can take this information. It knows which packages and which versions are installed on your servers. And then, for instance, it can say, okay, this host, for operational stability, we want to keep the packages at a certain level, but we really need this one package updated. So then it can incrementally update the content view by just giving a new version of this one affected package. This is called applying errata. This concept, as I said, that comes from Red Hat Linux, which is available for the whole Red Hat related world, like CentOS, Oracle, SUSE. Although CentOS does not deliver these errata information, so this is a service we offer to our customers as an addition. And for Debian and Ubuntu, this is something which is basically not known in this universe. There's also some addition we implemented into Orcharhino to have these errata also available for Debian Ubuntu systems. And the nice thing is they all present in the same way through the Orcharhino web interface. Okay, so that's package management. And then I said there's also this configuration management. Again, what does this mean? Well, as the name says, it deals with all that is summarized as configuration of your hosts. Let's say the user accounts that are present, some configuration files. And while release management says you which version of some packages are available, configuration management can care for the name of the packages that are installed, or which packages are actually installed. Puppet, Ansible, SaltStack are very popular tools in that area. They work very differently, but Orcharhino acts as an abstraction layer. So you can use these three tools and their individual strength through a unified interface. This is like the key of configuration management, but there's like also some things around. So you can use the Orcharhino just to send commands through SSH to your hosts. So you want to say you want to trigger a backup on, let's say, 50 servers in your data center, then this is one way to do that. And also there's OpenSCAP, which we also subsummarize under configuration management. OpenSCAP is a policy-based compliance checking tool, which will be configured through Ansible or Puppet, then checks regularly if your hosts fulfill compliance policies and reports the status back to Orcharhino. These policies usually deal with well-known security topics. Okay, so these are the three building blocks of Orcharhino. How does it do this under the hood? And what is the product Orcharhino at all? In the core, there is a software which is installed on a machine in your data center, so on premises, or there's also a cloud offering nowadays. It uses open source components as a core building block. Foreman and Catalog is really the main ingredient. Ansible, SaltStack, and Puppet are all now, let's say, as modularized plugins available. We do not just use them, we also have an engineering department that actively develops code for Foreman and Catalog and all the other involved software projects like Candlepen Pulp. And then for our customers, we do a very thorough quality assurance. So we test for each release which versions of the different components work well together. And like once a quarter or maybe slightly more often, there will be a new Orcharhino release with well-tested dependencies that you can just install. We also provide all these upgrade paths, for instance. What else do we do? As I already said, we provide errata for CentOS, Debian, and Ubuntu. And we provide client tools and templates. So all this unattended installation mechanisms is based on templates. So we write those templates, or we extend templates for the needs of our customers. And we also offer client software, so the software that is installed on your host to talk to the Orcharhino. We have a support department that answers questions and solves problems of our customers. And of course, there is the consulting where I'm part of, and we also offer trainings. And this as a whole is what actually is called the Orcharhino. So all these different parts play an important role. So it's not just the software, it's really also the services we offer. Okay, so this was my short introduction. You can find more information, of course, online on docs.orcharhino.com, which is a regularly updated version of our documentation. You find information about the product itself on orcharhino.com, and you find there also information on how to contact us. And you can also see previous webinars either on YouTube, there's a channel called Orcharhino, or here on Bright Talk. Okay, so this is the final slide of my short introduction. I would now continue with a demonstration of I have a freshly installed Orcharhino and will show you what it can do, unless there are some questions, but at the moment I don't see any.
So far there are no questions.
Okay, thank you, Jonas. So if you will have questions to the first introduction slides at a later point, just feel free to post them here to the chat, and then I can answer them at the end. Let me quickly switch to the live demonstration tab. Okay, so this is the welcome page of the Orcharhino. It's version 5.8, which is the most recent version. I log in as admin. This is the first view on the web interface of our Orcharhino. Well, we won't go through all the points you can see there. We simply don't have the time, so I just prepared some things for you. You see here on the left-hand side, there is menus, content, host, and configure. These are all corresponding to these central building blocks I was just telling. So content is for everything that deals with the package management. Host basically deals with the host deployment, and configure is all about configuration management. I can have a look here at content products. This is basically an overview which repositories are available on my Orcharhino. It's a fresh install, so there is only one repository or one product there, which I clicked already during installation. So during installation, you can say which operating systems you want to use. I just clicked the CentOS one, so this is the only client I have there. Of course, it's also possible to install more clients afterwards. Under hosts, I can have a look at all hosts. Again, this is rather empty. Orcharhino just knows itself, and so far they have been deployed no further hosts. Okay, I want to ignore these the next two menu points for the moment, applications and configure. These are really beyond scope of this webinar, but there will be subsequent webinars about those points. Okay, so what can we do so far? Can we already create a host? You see there is a button, create host. I find the same thing under hosts, create host, which leads me to a form. And this is how the host deployment basically looks like. I have a lot of fields I can fill in, and then the whole deployment process would start. Currently, I see a pre-filled field here where deploy on bare metal, and there's no other choice. Apparently, I don't have a bare metal server here, so apparently this is a problem for the moment, but we will solve this quite soon. So let's just go back to the content products thing and start, well, letting Orcharhino know that there might be repositories we want to sync. I do this first because also synchronization takes some time. So I create a product. As you see, I already have the CentOS client, so obviously I want to deploy a CentOS host. We take CentOS 7. Leave all these fields empty for the moment because I don't need them for a quick deployment. Now I am in the field where the repositories assigned to this product are listed. Of course, there is no repository yet, so I start adding repositories. So we need, for the basic installation, 3 repositories: the OS repository, it is a yum repository. If I check the type of the repository, instantly more fields are available. The most important one is the upstream URL, which tells orcharhino where to synchronize the packages from. And that's it already. I leave all these fields in their default state and say save. Now I have the OS repository. Then I add 2 more extras. Also yum repository. Again, click on save. And then we also need updates. Yum stream URL. It's very similar to the first ones. And that's it. Okay. Now I want to synchronize them. I can check them one by one or just all of them. And then I have this button here, sync now, which starts our sync process. You see there are 3 tasks. It's now running. I can go to content sync status to see what's happening there. And I see there are 2 products. For the CentOS 7, there I have a progress bar. And it will start the synchronization. So this will progress live. We don't follow it. Actually, I cheated a little. So this is a very fast synchronization. In reality, of course, this would take longer. Okay, but in the meantime, it's still working somehow. We have a look at the infrastructure, which is there. So this menu point infrastructure is, especially at the beginning, it's very important. This basically shows us the orcharhino components in our infrastructure. So, sorry, to go to smart proxies first. So we see that there is this orcharhino listed. So this is a list of smart proxies. A smart proxy can either be the orcharhino itself or one of the orcharhino proxies. So we can have a distributed infrastructure. At the beginning, of course, there's only one of them. We can see all the enabled functions on the orcharhino. Also, if I click on it, I see a more detailed view, all the, let's say, features that are active. This is just what I clicked during the original installation. So it can do, for instance, can play DHCP server and can provide DNS. The TFTP is relevant for the deployment and so on. What I want to do here, if I click on this actions button, I have a menu point import IPv4 subnets. I click this because I want to make the orcharhino know which subnets I'm going to serve. And it instantly finds that orcharhino is living in a 10.050/24 net. And I can also right now name it. Let's call it orcharhino. That's quite simple. I choose item to DHCP because there is a DHCP server. And I think that's it for the moment. Now I submit this. Now I can go to infrastructure subnets and I see the net I just created here. If I click on it, I have some more options. You see there are some tabs that are new here. So this is the one we just saw roughly. But we also can set several proxies, like for remote execution, which Orcarhino or Orcarhino proxy would be responsible for remote execution. I set this to Orcarhino, this is important, and all the others I will also set to our Orcarhino. And also the corresponding domain will be set. Speaking of domain, so the domain setting was added automatically by our installer. So we see orcharhino.atix trainings. This is like the top domain. Also here I have to set the DNS proxy. Okay, what else is here? I said I want to deploy a virtual machine, so I need some provider, some hypervisor. Hypervisors are found under compute resources. I can there create links to hypervisors in your data center or to cloud resources. I now want to take our local libvirt provider. So the Orcarhino here is running as a libvirt virtual machine. Then the provider I choose here should be libvirt, and the URL is already pre-filled, so I use this qemail.plus/ssh field and connect to our hypervisor. I can test the connection, and I see green button here, green button there, so this is kind of working. And now I submit, and I have our first, see if this is correct, yes, okay. Our first compute resource. I need one more thing because I want to automate a lot, which also means I need standardization. So I have to define compute profiles. The installer predefines 3 profiles, small, medium, and large, but they are still unspecified. I just specify the medium one. I give the medium host 2 CPUs, 4 GB of RAM. The rest is fine here. I want to attach it to a virtual network called Orcarhino. So this is a network which is defined within my libvirt environment. And this should have a bit more than 10 GB of storage. So we give it 40 GB. Okay, and that's it. So are we now ready to deploy a host? We do one intermediate step. We create a host group. A host group is something like a template for creating hosts. So if I often create the same type of host, I would use this host group to fix the settings. I call this Center 7. So which are the other settings I have here? I want to deploy this on our libvirt and use the medium compute profile. Okay, so now we know where to create the virtual machine, but what shall we install there? Let's go to the operating system tab, and we see we have to choose the parameters for our operating system. The architecture is x86-64. Choose CentOS 7.x. This is something the Orcarhino installer prepared for us, and we can also choose the installation medium, which is the CentOS 7 mirror, so an upstream mirror for CentOS. We have to choose some partition table, and we have to set some default root password. Okay, what else do we need? We should set the network. And that's it for the moment. So this is like the preparation for a host. A host and a host group CentOS 7 should be deployed on the libvirt. It should have an operating system, CentOS 7X, and it should be attached to the right subnet. Okay. So we save the host group, and now we go back to our host create host menu, and we say host group. We choose to just the one that has just been created. You see, Orcharhino is suggesting host names. I call this online. We'll probably later see why. Okay. As I said, this is a template. So what does it do? It pre-fills all the known fields. So you see here's the deployment is filled. The operating system is also set to what was just said. And all the network things appear here in this interfaces section. And again, we ignore this. We can see the virtual machine is what we just chosen. Okay. Now we can say submit. Some things happen. The virtual machine gets created. The DHCP server gets notified of the new host, the name server. We can follow this installation live through this console button. It's not working. In German, there's a nice word for this. This is called Vorführ effect. I don't know the right English translation. So basically, you could just see the output of the console, like the video output. Unfortunately, I cannot really debug right now what's going wrong. So sorry for that. Installation is now running in the background. You see here on this overview that the build status is pending installation. This will at some point change to installed. So the end of this untitled installation always is sending home to the Orcharhino that the installation has finished now. I can also see more information here, but I want to go on and show you a second way of how to create hosts. Something I call offline, because it doesn't use the upstream repository, so we don't query the mirror, the CentOS mirror, but use the synchronized repositories on the Orcharhino, so we see if they are synchronized at all. So we go to the products page and see CentOS 7 last synced 11 minutes ago, 3 successfully synced repositories. Perfect. So we have all the Orcharhino repository, CentOS repositories there. If I go to one of these repositories, the OS one, I see this has distribution information, and there is a flag bootable true, which means we can directly boot from the content of this repository. So how do we do this? We need to create a content view. A content view, as I said, is this snapshot of the repository. Create a content view for CentOS 7. Just a simple content view, no more settings. And now I have to say which repositories shall be part of this content view. So which repositories I want to include in these published staged set of repositories. Of course, I want to have the CentOS client and all the repositories being part of the CentOS 7 product. I have to add these. So this is basically something that our host later can see. So there's no version of this content view. So the whole content management is a bit complicated at first sight. So we first have to define which repositories are part, and then we have to publish it. So publish really means we now create a snapshot of the repositories at the now given point in time. So while it's promoting, you see that it's promoted to some environment called library. We also skip like the whole concept of the environments. We just say we have one stream of versions. And we can just create an activation key. What is an activation key? Well, an activation key is, as you know it from some software, some key you use to some subscription server to say, here, I have this activation key, give me everything that belongs to this activation key. So again, we call this CentOS7 because we want to create, this is the name, and it's also the activation key itself. And we let it point to this just published content view CentOS7, which means I can also take some already installed host, use this activation key and a cool tool called Subscription Manager, if you know this, to register with the orcharhino. Now I save this. So this is now created. Currently, there is no product associated to this activation key. That's why I have to go to this tab, subscriptions. No products assigned to this activation key, so I assign CentOS7 and the CentOS7 client because I want my host to be able to access those repositories. And then I can do some fine-tuning. I don't need the CentOS client for 6 and 8 and say disabled. Okay. What do I do with this? So I have this content view, so I have this snapshot of our repository. Now I can make use of this in our host group. Go back to the host group, say CentOS7. We associate it with a library, with a content view, and of course we say it should obtain this information from orcharhino itself. And now we don't want to boot anymore from the mirror, but we want to boot directly from the repository. We have to change the name of the operating system because this is the one which is encoded inside the repository. And then we have a new option called synced content, and we can even directly choose from which repository we want to have our synced content. Okay. Perfect. You can just submit it. Now we should, as I already created it, we can just add the activation key here, which is like the last tab here, and it will right away pre-fill the the activation key which fits to your settings of library, lifecycle environment, and content view in the first tab. This what this does is that right after installation, the host will be attached to the orcharhino and obtain all its packages from there. So now we create a second host. We call this sync, so it's not online anymore. Again, the host group is CentOS7. We can check. Now it looks a bit different. We have the lifecycle environment set, the content view, and the content source. Virtual machine is still the same, but in the operating system, again, we see here it boots from synced content. And the activation key actually also appears here under parameters, which is this KT activation keys parameter. But this just for the record. Okay, I can click on submit. And now, okay. Let's see if this, no, okay, it's working. So this is the second host. Unfortunately, probably the console is still not working. Yeah, sorry for that. What we could basically see here is that the installation from the local source here is much faster. So this host will probably be installed or finished, will have finished installation at the same time as the first host, just because it does not have to fetch anything from the internet. The network connection between this new host, synced.orcharhino and so on, is just a local connection. So they are on the same hypervisor. So this will be a very fast installation, usually around 5 minutes, while the other one might take up to 10 minutes. And that's why I think they are probably finished at the same time. see if there's already some indication. Yeah, so this is still pending installation. Okay, so I hope I could show you that it just takes a couple of minutes after the installation of your Orcharhino to be able to do some basic tasks, like attaching a compute resource and right away using this compute resource to install hosts there. And yeah, I'm happy if you have any questions for me.
So if you want to have some questions, there are some there. So the first one is rather easy to answer, I guess. The question was, does it work with VMware?
Yeah, that's quite easy. VMware works perfect. So VMware has quite a lot of functions, of course. You can create hosts there, as with libvirt. I think the important thing is that you can even create snapshots right through the web interface here. So which is currently not possible for the libvirt. So if I go to, there's nothing saying snapshot, but for VMware you can right away here create a snapshot and roll back also.
And I want to add there are also different other hypervisors such as Proxmox, where you also have the snapshot feature.
Exactly,
Okay,
yeah.
so then there was a question if there is the possibility to test Orcharhino on the own infrastructure.
Yeah, this is also possible. You can just request a demonstration or a demo version on the website orcharhino.com. You will be provided with a download link to the installer or to an virtual appliance for VMware, and an activation key which is valid for by default 1 month. So you can just try it, and you can also get an individual demonstration if you want to.
Okay, and then the last one is, so currently the last one is there an easier way to create many repositories, something which is faster than clicking everything by hand?
Yeah. So the web interface is just one way to talk to the Orcharhino. There are other ways, more programmatic ways, and probably two of those ways are really good for this task. The one is the command line interface, which is called Hammer. So it's just a command line interface you can install on any Red Hat-like Linux. Configure it that it talks to your Orcharhino, then you can just do something like Hammer repo create, and then you give all the parameters, and then you can use this for scripting, of course. So you can just write a bash script with a loop, which creates a lot of repositories. If they are there, you can, with a one command and a loop or something, or some bash script, create all the content views, publish them. And if you say, well, bash scripting is not the best way to automate, there's also a way to do this using Ansible. There are the form and Ansible modules, which is a set of modules for the configuration management tool Ansible that help you automate all the tasks in an even very sophisticated way around Orcharhino. So you can create repositories through Ansible then, you can create content views, you can publish them, you can even create host groups, you can create hosts, boot them through Ansible. And the nice thing about the former Ansible modules is that they are almost in every case idempotent. So you can write an Ansible playbook or Ansible role that performs a certain task. You can run it a second time, and it already knows if the tasks defined there have already been fulfilled or if they have still to be done. So you can just, let's say, write a list of all the repositories, like just a YAML file containing the names, the URLs, and the ordering of all your repositories. Let your Ansible playbook run regularly, like once a night, and then you just have to add more repositories to your list. The next day you will have a more recent list of products. So Hammer as a command line tool for shell scripting, and Form and Ansible modules are the two tools.
Okay, I think that's it with the questions in this webinar.
Okay.
So maybe we can add that the next webinar will focus on a more exotic topic in Orcharhino. It is about Orcharhino and Windows. However, it will be in German, I think, because we switch every month between a German webinar and an English one, because our main customers currently are German. Yeah, so.
Yeah, so that's also a nice opportunity, also because Windows deployment still is interesting. And I think can then thank you for your attention. And we hope to see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.